You crack one open after a long day. Cold, familiar, the same brand your dad drank, maybe the same one your grandfather brought to every backyard barbecue. You trust it without even thinking about it, because in Canada, beer isn't just a drink, it's part of the culture. But here's what the major breweries don't want you to know. Some of the most popular beers on Canadian shelves are packed with GMO corn adjuncts, artificial additives, misleading labels, and, in some cases, documented deceptions that ended up in court. And while your government regulates where you can buy beer, nobody is standing between you and what's actually inside that can. Today we're counting down 8 beer brands you should stop drinking, and we're going to end with a few names that have actually earned your trust. Stay until the end, because you'll want to know which beers are still worth raising a glass to. At number 8, Lucky Lager. The name promises fortune. The reality is something else entirely. Lucky Lager has been a fixture in Canadian discount beer culture for decades, sitting at the bottom of the price rack in liquor stores from Victoria to Fredericton. Labatt Breweries of Canada, which is itself owned by Anheuser-Busch InBev, the Belgian-Brazilian multinational that controls a massive chunk of what Canadians drink, produces Lucky Lager and markets it as straightforward Canadian value. But value for who? The brewing process for Lucky Lager relies heavily on corn adjuncts. That means instead of using whole barley malt as the primary fermentable ingredient, which is the traditional approach to lager brewing, the company supplements with processed corn, a substantially cheaper input that cuts production costs without you knowing. The corn used in North American mass-market brewing is almost entirely derived from genetically modified crops. Health Canada has approved GMO corn for consumption, but the agency does not require beer labels to disclose when GMO adjuncts have been used in fermentation. So you are drinking a product whose agricultural origin is deliberately hidden from you, and there is no regulation forcing that to change. Open a can of Lucky Lager and take a long sniff before you take a sip. There is very little happening there. A faint metallic sweetness, a thin grain smell. Nothing complex, nothing layered, nothing that tells you a brewer cared about what went into this. Drink it and you will find a thin, watery body with an aftertaste that fades fast because there was never much there to begin with. The corn adjuncts dilute the malt character, leaving you with something that technically qualifies as beer under Canadian law, but delivers almost none of what beer is supposed to offer. For anyone watching their blood sugar, the rapid fermentable carbohydrates in corn adjunct beers produce a sharper insulin response than all malt counterparts. And for anyone who simply thought they were getting honest Canadian beer, you were getting the cheapest possible version of it dressed up in a retro label. Coming in at number 7, Carling, the British brand that moved its production into the Molson Coors Canada network and became a fixture in Quebec and Ontario discount stores. Carling is one of those beers that has been around long enough to feel like it belongs here, but if you follow the money and the ownership trail, you land squarely in the middle of a massive global corporation that has faced repeated scrutiny for quality and transparency. Molson Coors, which produces Carling for the Canadian market, is one of the 2 dominant conglomerates controlling Canadian beer shelves. Their business model depends on scale, and scale depends on cost reduction. Carling is a product optimized for margin, not for the people drinking it. Independent taste analyses have consistently placed Carling at the lower end of quality assessments, with reviewers noting thin mouthfeel, minimal hop presence, and an artificial sweetness that does not come from the grain but from the adjunct blend used in production. The hops in mass-market beers like Carling are almost never whole flower hops. They are processed hop extracts or pellets that deliver bitterness without the complex aromatics of proper hopping. You are getting a chemically simplified version of bitterness, the appearance of beer character without the substance. For families on fixed budgets who keep Carling in the fridge because it is one of the cheapest options at the LCBO or the beer store, understand that cheap pricing in this industry is never an accident. It always reflects something cut out of the product. In Carling's case, that means malt content, hop quality, and brewing time. Canadian labeling regulations for beer do not require ingredient disclosure the way food products do. Number 6 on our list is Kokanee, and this one might surprise you. Kokanee has long traded on a powerful piece of Canadian identity marketing, with its glacier imagery, its Rocky Mountain water claims, and its association with British Columbia outdoor culture. Generations of BC residents grew up thinking Kokanee was their local beer. Here's the truth. Kokanee is owned by Labatt Breweries of Canada, which is owned by Anheuser-Busch InBev, headquartered in Leuven, Belgium. There's nothing grassroots about it. The glacier is a marketing image. The Rocky Mountain water framing is a positioning strategy. The beer itself is a standard adjunct lager, brewed to the same industrial template as dozens of other brands in the AB InBev portfolio. What makes Kokanee particularly worth discussing is the documented gap between what the marketing promises and what the product delivers. Beer reviewers and consumer forums have noted consistently that Kokanee, despite its premium outdoor branding and positioning in the mid-price tier, delivers a product profile essentially identical to lower-priced adjunct lagers, with corn or rice adjuncts contributing to a thin mouthfeel and a quick fading finish. You are paying for the glacier. You are not getting it in your glass. In 2015, a class action lawsuit in the United States targeted Anheuser-Busch InBev over allegations that it systematically diluted its beers with water after fermentation, resulting in lower alcohol content than advertised. The lawsuit affected multiple brands in the AB InBev family and resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement. Canadian consumers drinking Kokanee and other Labatt-owned products had no equivalent legal recourse, even though the same parent company was producing their beer. When a corporation has been taken to court and forced to settle over watering down its products in one market, that is information you deserve to have when deciding what to drink in another. Number 5. Bud Light Canada. We need to talk about what is actually inside this can, because the advertising never will. Bud Light is marketed as the easy drinking choice for people who want to have a good time without overdoing it. Lower calorie, lighter taste, the obvious choice for casual drinking occasions. What the commercials leave out is the ingredient reality. Bud Light in the North American market is brewed with rice as a fermentable adjunct alongside barley malt. That rice is sourced from industrial agricultural operations where GMO crop varieties are widespread. Like Lucky Lager, Bud Light does not disclose adjunct use on its Canadian label. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency does not require it. Health Canada does not require it. So you are once again consuming a product where the core agricultural inputs are intentionally obscured. The controversy around Bud Light became visible in the United States in 2019 when Anheuser-Busch InBev and Miller Coors became entangled in a public advertising dispute over corn syrup disclosure. Miller Coors began running Super Bowl ads disclosing that Bud Light was brewed with corn syrup, prompting Bud Light to fire back that it uses rice, not corn syrup. What was remarkable about this exchange is that both companies were essentially admitting to consumers that their flagship light beers are brewed with cheap industrial adjuncts, and the argument was only about which cheap adjunct was being used. Canadian consumers watching from the sidelines received none of this disclosure because Canadian beer advertising does not operate under the same competitive pressure to admit ingredient realities. Open a can of Bud Light. It is cold, it is carbonated, it is inoffensive. It is also thin, hollow, and built around an agricultural input chosen entirely for cost efficiency. For seniors who drink Bud Light because it feels gentle on the stomach, The trade-off is a product stripped of meaningful nutrition, meaningful flavor, and meaningful honesty about what you are actually consuming. At number 4, Lakeport Honey Lager. The name creates a specific expectation. Honey, warmth, a slightly sweet, natural taste built on real ingredients. For Ontario consumers especially, Lakeport built a loyal following on the promise of affordable beer with a twist. Then Labatt, the AB InBev subsidiary, acquired Lakeport in 2007, and the brand's story changed completely. When large conglomerates acquire small breweries, the first priority is almost always cost normalization. That means ingredients get rationalized, processes get standardized, and the things that made a smaller brand distinctive get quietly removed or diluted to fit the industrial production template. Lakeport Honey Lager today uses artificial honey flavoring rather than substantive honey additions. The warm sweetness on the palate is a flavor compound engineered to suggest honey, not honey itself, added during brewing. This is a legal practice in Canada. There is no prohibition on using artificial flavoring in beer and calling the product by a name that implies the real ingredient. Crack open a Lakeport Honey Lager, and you will get that sweetness up front, followed by very little. The honey note is one-dimensional, a single flat chemical note with no complexity behind it, because complexity requires real ingredients interacting in fermentation. Real honey added during brewing produces subtle esters and flavor compounds that evolve as you drink. A flavor additive produces one artificial note and then nothing. For anyone drinking Lakeport Honey Lager because they prefer something naturally sweeter, you are not getting a naturally sweeter beer. You are getting artificial sweetness in a product that obscures exactly how it achieves that taste. When you buy food or drink on the basis of what the name promises, you deserve to know whether the promise is real. Number 3, Coors Light, the silver bullet, the beer brewed with Rocky Mountain water. The brand Molson Coors Canada has spent hundreds of millions of dollars planting in the Canadian imagination as synonymous with refreshment, mountain purity, and honest, thirst-quenching satisfaction. The reality inside the can is considerably less romantic. Coors Light is brewed using corn adjuncts as a primary cost reduction strategy. The corn is sourced from industrial agricultural supply chains where GMO varieties dominate the landscape. The Rocky Mountain water claim, while technically referencing a real water source in the American brewing operation, is a marketing framing chosen specifically to evoke purity and naturalness in a product that is neither pure nor natural in its ingredient sourcing. Pour a Coors Light into a glass, which the branding strongly discourages because the glass makes the product's thin, pale character visible in a way the opaque silver can conceal. You will see a very pale golden liquid with modest carbonation. The aroma is faint, the malt character almost non-existent, the hop presence barely detectable. For someone who drinks beer and wants to taste beer, Coors Light is engineered specifically to minimize every quality a brewer would work to achieve. That is a business decision, not a craft one. For anyone managing blood sugar or trying to make informed choices about what they put in their body, the lack of ingredient transparency on Canadian Coors Light packaging makes that completely impossible. At number 2, Budweiser Canada, the king of beers, the red label, the bow tie, the brand that has spent over a century convincing the world it represents the pinnacle of North American brewing tradition. But here is the history lesson the Budweiser ads never include. In 2015, a class action lawsuit was filed in the United States alleging that Anheuser-Busch InBev, the Belgian-Brazilian conglomerate that owns Budweiser, had for years been systematically watering down its beers after fermentation, resulting in alcohol content lower than the advertised amount. The lawsuit named Budweiser specifically, along with several other AB InBev brands. the company settled for a reported $10 million without admitting wrongdoing. That settlement is a matter of public record. Canadian consumers who were drinking Budweiser produced by Labatt, which is AB InBev Canada, during that period had no equivalent legal protection, no parallel investigation by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, no public accounting of what happened on this side of the border. The company that settled a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in one country over watering down its beer continued selling the same brand in Canada without any required disclosure. Budweiser Canada is also brewed with beechwood aging as a marketing centerpiece. In 2017, American beer consumers filed complaints challenging whether the beechwood aging claim was misleading, arguing that lining tanks with beechwood strips to aid yeast settlement was fundamentally different from the traditional wood aging that the marketing implies. None of this reached Canadian labeling requirements. Open a Budweiser. Smell the faint rice sweetness from its adjunct base. Notice the thin body, the fast finish, the complete absence of anything suggesting a brewer made choices about flavor. This is a beer engineered for maximum volume sales, not for quality or honest representation to the people drinking it. And at number 1, the brand that has built its entire identity on a deception hidden in plain sight. Molson Canadian. You have seen the commercials, the rant, the pride, the flag. I am Canadian. There is arguably no piece of beer marketing in this country's history more effective than what Molson built around the idea that drinking Molson Canadian is an act of national identity. And that is exactly why this deception deserves the top spot on this list. Molson Coors is not a Canadian company. It is a multinational corporation headquartered in Chicago with dual-listed shares in Denver and Toronto. The CEO does not answer to Canadian communities. The shareholders are global institutional investors. The profits do not stay in Canada in any meaningful way that advertising implies when it drapes the maple leaf over a beer can. The beer itself is brewed using corn adjuncts, the same industrial agricultural inputs used across the mass market lager category. The malt profile is minimal. The hop character is engineered for inoffensiveness rather than for any meaningful craft expression. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency does not require beer manufacturers to disclose fermentable adjuncts, hop sources, or additive use on consumer-facing labels. Molson Canadian exploits this regulatory gap completely. The most damaging element of the Molson Canadian story is not the corn adjuncts or the multinational ownership structure. It is the sustained, deliberate manipulation of Canadian identity and national pride as a sales mechanism for an industrial adjunct lager that does not earn the flag it wraps itself in. When a corporation weaponizes your sense of who you are to sell you something that does not live up to its promises, that is a betrayal that goes beyond ingredients. Molson does not respect the Canadian consumer enough to be honest. It only respects your emotions enough to exploit them. So, here you are. You just ran through your mental inventory of what is sitting in your fridge right now, and maybe the news is not great. The brands that have been part of Canadian social life for generations, the ones passed around at hockey nights and summer weekends and family gatherings, have been cutting corners, hiding ingredients, and, in some cases, settling lawsuits over exactly the kind of deception we have been discussing today. The beer industry in Canada benefits enormously from opaque labeling laws and a consumer culture built on brand loyalty that was purchased with advertising, not earned with quality. But it does not have to stay that way, because honest Canadian beer still exists, and you deserve to know where to find it. When the entire mass market landscape has let you down, you need somewhere real to land, and Beau's all-natural brewing company from Van Cleek Hill, Ontario, is exactly that. Beau's was founded in 2006 by Steve and Tim Beauchamp, a father and son team, and from the very beginning it was built on a principle that is shockingly rare in Canadian commercial brewing. full transparency about what goes into the beer. Bo's Lugtread Lagered Ale, their flagship, is brewed from 100% certified organic ingredients. That certification is verified by a third party. It means the barley malt was grown without synthetic pesticides, the hops were cultivated without chemical intervention, and the operation meets documented organic standards. Bo's publishes its ingredient sourcing information. This is not common in Canadian brewing, and it matters enormously when you have just spent time learning how much the major brands conceal. Open a Lugtread, and the difference is immediate. The aroma has layers, a light graininess from the malt, a gentle hop note, something slightly fruity from the yeast character. Pour it into a glass, and you will see a beer with actual body and color, not the pale ghost liquid that mass-market lagers produce. Bo's has won awards at the Canadian Brewing Awards, not because they hired the best marketing firm, but because the product is genuinely good. For Canadian seniors who have been drinking the same industrial lager for decades and wondering why beer always leaves them flat and unsatisfied, Bo's is the answer. Real malt provides B vitamins and natural compounds your body can actually use. For families who want to know what is in their drink, Bo's will tell you. No other major brand on today's list would dare do the same. If you are in Western Canada, or simply want a second honest option, Steamworks Brewing out of Vancouver, British Columbia, has been doing things properly since 1995. Steamworks operates locations in Vancouver and a production facility in Burnaby, and they have built a genuine reputation in the BC craft beer community for quality ingredients and the kind of transparency that corporate breweries actively avoid. Their beers have received strong marks from independent evaluators, and unlike the Kokanee Glacier fiction or the Coors Light Mountain Water storytelling, Steamworks is an actual BC operation where the people making decisions about what goes into your glass are working in the same community as the people drinking it. That accountability changes how a brewery operates. When your customers can walk into your location and ask your brewer directly why a decision was made, you cannot hide behind continental corporate policy. For anyone in British Columbia who has been reaching for a Kokanee out of regional loyalty, redirect that loyalty somewhere that has actually earned it. Steamworks is real craft from a real BC company, and the beer will tell you immediately that the ingredients are in a completely different category from anything on the first 8 slots of today's list. Go check your fridge right now. If you see a Molson Canadian, a Budweiser, a Coors Light, a Bud Light, a Kokanee, a Lakeport Honey Lager, a Carling, or a Lucky Lager, you now know exactly what you are looking at. Industrial adjunct lagers brewed by multinationals, some of which have settled lawsuits over deceptive practices, all operating behind Canada's permissive beer labeling laws to keep you in the dark about what you are actually consuming. Real beer exists in this country. Honest beer exists. Bo's All Natural and Steamworks are not the only options. They are examples of what the industry looks like when a brewery decides that transparency and ingredient integrity matter more than margin. Your loyalty to a brand should be earned by what is in the product, not what is in the advertising campaign. If this opened your eyes to what has been sitting in your fridge, drop a comment with the brand you are walking away from today. Subscribe so you never miss another investigation like this one. Your health, your money, and your sense of Canadian pride all deserve better than what the big labels have been selling you. Stay sharp, stay informed, and drink something that has actually earned the right to call itself Canadian.